The heat from a bonfire was nothing compared to the cold fury solidifying in my gut. I felt the rough hands on my arms, the cheap fabric of my service blouse ripping with a sound like tearing cartilage. They held me there, forcing me to watch as Leo Vance, their smirking leader, tossed it into the flames. The navy blue material blackened instantly, but my eyes were locked on the golden trident emblem over my heart. I watched it curl, melt, and disappear into an unrecognizable lump. But they mistook my silence for fear. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now, let me tell you exactly how it all began. Support Operations Base, Trident Point, baked under the Gulf Coast sun, a sprawling grid of concrete and steel where the air tasted of salt and diesel. For me, Commander Rain, it was a kind of purgatory. 18 months ago, a piece of shrapnel from an IED in Kandahar had carved a path through my left side, missing my spine by millimeters. The Navy, in its infinite wisdom, put me on medical reassignment, a gray zone where you're not quite broken enough for retirement, but too dented for active duty. So here I was, auditing supply manifests instead of planning missions. I still wore my uniform every day, not out of nostalgia, but because I was still an active duty officer. The slight limp in my step was a constant reminder of the mission that had put me here, but the crisp, pressed blouse and the trident on my chest were reminders of who I was. It was a promise I'd made to myself and to the brothers I'd lost. I would be back. Most of the seasoned personnel understood. They saw the way I carried myself, the quiet efficiency, and left me to my work. Master Chief Elias Thorne, a man whose face was a roadmap of a 30-year Navy career, had figured me out on day one. He'd walked into the armory to find me field stripping an M4, my eyes closed, my hands moving with a fluid muscle memory that no logistics course could ever teach. He never said a word about it, but from that day on, my requisitions were always approved without question, and a fresh pot of coffee was always waiting in the office. He knew, but there was another element on the base, a pocket of resentment that festered near the motor pool. I called them the washout crew, 5 men bound together by a shared history of failure. Their unofficial leader was Leo Vance, a guy with a Hollywood jawline and a chip on his shoulder the size of an aircraft carrier. He'd lasted all of 10 days at BUD/S before washing out with stress fractures. Then there was Rick J.T. Jensen, who'd failed out of air rescue school and blamed a sabotage dive pack. Kevin Shaw never even made it that far, flagged for behavioral concerns during orientation. Sam Jr. Jones was a reservist who talked about his inevitable SEAL career as if it were a foregone conclusion, not a near impossibility. And finally, Greg Russo, a civilian contractor who acted like his cousin being a Marine sniper, made him an expert on special warfare. From my first week, I felt their eyes on me. I saw them whispering as I walked past, their gazes lingering on the trident on my chest. To them, I was an anomaly they couldn't comprehend. A woman wearing the insignia they'd bled for and failed to earn. In their minds, I was either a fraud, a case of stolen valor, or I was the living embodiment of their own inadequacy. Both possibilities fueled a quiet, simmering rage. I could sense it building, like the pressure in the air before a storm. I knew it wasn't a matter of if the confrontation would happen, but when. And my training had taught me one thing above all else. When you know a storm is coming, you don't run from it. You prepare for it, you find the high ground, and you wait for the perfect moment to face it head on. They thought they were the hunters, watching their prey. They had no idea I was watching them right back, cataloging their routines, their weaknesses, their tells. They were a problem that needed to be solved, and my entire life had been about solving problems. The testing began with small, deliberate acts, like probing a defensive perimeter. One afternoon, Greg Russo accidentally sent a pallet of ammunition crates crashing to the floor just feet from my workstation. The boom echoed through the cavernous supply bay. I felt my entire body tense for a split second, my combat instincts screaming incoming, before my conscious mind took over. I took a slow, deliberate breath, assessed the mess, and without a word, began res-tacking the heavy boxes. "My bad," he called out with a lazy grin. making no move to help. I didn't acknowledge him. Showing anger would be giving him a victory. Silence was a weapon they didn't understand. A few days later, Kevin Shaw took to loitering near my desk, making loud comments to anyone who would listen about civilians playing dress-up. Some people got no respect for the uniform. He'd say, just loud enough for me to hear. My inner voice remained calm. They're testing the fence for weaknesses. Let them test. The next week, Sam Jr. Jones decided to physically block my path as I was carrying a sensitive case of optical equipment. It was a clumsy, telegraphed move. I saw it coming a mile away. Instead of stopping or asking him to move, I made a subtle shift in my footing and flowed around him without breaking stride, like water moving around a rock. I caught the flicker of surprise and frustration in his eyes. He had wanted a reaction, a confrontation. I gave him nothing. Each incident was a data point filed away in my mental dossier. They were predictable, sloppy, and driven by an insecurity so profound it was almost pathetic. The first direct confrontation happened in the small arms supply cage. Leo Vance and JT cornered me while I was inventorying night vision gear. "Damn," Leo said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Look how she handles that gear. Like she's actually used it before." I didn't look up from my clipboard. "Maybe she's been practicing," JT added with a sneer. I calmly set my pen down and met Leo's gaze. My eyes were flat, devoid of emotion. "Do you need something?" I asked, my voice low and even. "Or are you just here to waste oxygen?" His bravado faltered for a second. He wasn't used to being challenged so directly. He took a step closer, tried to use his size to intimidate me. "Just being friendly," he said. I assessed him in a heartbeat. The way he stood, favoring his right side, the slight tension in his jaw. He was all bark, a bully who crumbled when faced with real resistance. "I'm working," I said, my tone making it clear the conversation was over. I picked up my pen and went back to my inventory. The dismissal was absolute. As I walked out, I heard him mutter, "This isn't over." That evening, Master Chief Thorne found me in my office. "Commander," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Those boys been giving you trouble?" I appreciated his concern. He was a good man. "Nothing I can't handle, Master Chief." He leaned against the doorframe, his expression serious. "I pulled some duty rosters. They're coordinating their schedules. This isn't random. My advice? Document everything. Guys like that, they get bolder when they think they've figured out your pattern." It was sound advice, but I had already chosen a different path. I wasn't going to document. I wasn't going to report them. My entire career had been spent operating outside of conventional channels. These men wanted a reaction. They wanted to see me break. I was going to give them exactly what they wanted, just not in the way they expected. I was going to let them escalate until they crossed a line they could never uncross. I was setting a trap, and they were walking right into it. The trap was sprung on a Friday night. On the far edge of the base, there was a large, built-in brick fire pit where the junior personnel gathered to blow off steam. The air was thick with the smell of cheap beer, burning scrap wood, and restless testosterone. I never went to these things, but someone had left a case of classified guidance systems near the loading dock, and it was my responsibility to secure it. I drove it over, planning to drop it with the duty NCO and leave. It was supposed to be a 5-minute stop. As I turned to go, a voice cut through the noise. Well, look who it is." I turned. All 5 of them stepped out from the shadows around the fire pit, moving to surround me. It was a clumsy attempt at a tactical formation, so poorly executed it was almost insulting. "Didn't figure you for a party animal, Commander," Leo sneered, his words slurring slightly. The liquid courage was flowing. "That uniform," JT said, pointing at my chest. "You ever take it off? Kinda weird for a civilian." They closed in, their comments a barrage of practiced insults. I stood my ground, my bag with the secure comms phone feeling heavy on my shoulder. "Let's settle this," Leo said, stepping right into my personal space. "Take off that blouse. Toss it in the fire. We all walk away, no harm, no foul." His eyes gleamed with a vicious excitement. He thought he had me cornered, that I had no choice. "No," I said. The single word was quiet, but it hung in the air like a steel plate. That's when Kevin Shaw launched. He was fast but sloppy. He grabbed the shoulder of my blouse, and the fabric ripped with a sickening sound. Before I could react, JT grabbed my other arm. They were on me in a second, their hands grabbing, pulling. The struggle was brief. I didn't fight back in a way they'd recognize. I allowed them to wrestle the blouse off me, my mind a cold, calculating machine. While they were focused on their petty victory, I was committing their faces to memory, noting the smell of their breath, the specific way their bodies moved. This wasn't a fight. It was evidence gathering. Leo held up my torn blouse like a trophy as the others cheered. Then, with a theatrical flourish, he threw it into the heart of the bonfire. The flames devoured it instantly. I stood there in my thin undershirt, the firelight dancing on my skin. I didn't feel the chill of the night air. I didn't feel humiliation. I felt a switch flip deep inside me. I watched the gold trident, the symbol of my brotherhood, of sacrifice, of everything I had ever worked for, begin to blacken and curl. In that moment, they ceased to be pathetic washouts. They became a threat to be neutralized. They laughed, thinking they had won, thinking they had broken me. They didn't see the cold, hard clarity in my eyes. With a slow, deliberate calm, I turned my back on them and walked away into the darkness. I didn't run. I didn't look back. As soon as I was out of the firelight, I pulled out my secure satellite phone. It wasn't a standard issue device. I scrolled to a single contact, a number I hadn't used in nearly 2 years. I typed a short, 2-word message, protocol nightfall. Then I added my current grid coordinates and hit send. The confirmation message came back in less than a second. They had burned my uniform. They had no idea they had just started a war. At 0600, a matte, gray government sedan with tinted windows rolled silently through the main gate of Trident Point. The base was just coming to life, but as the car glided across the asphalt, a hush fell over the morning activity. Forklifts slowed to a stop. Conversations died mid-sentence. The car pulled up in front of the main supply hangar, and when the back door opened, I stepped out. The transformation was absolute. I was in full combat gear. A tactical plate carrier over a moisture-wicking navy shirt, desert camo trousers, and hardened boots. My sidearm was holstered at my thigh, and a worn, faded trident was sewn on my chest rig. The weight of the gear was a familiar comfort, like shaking hands with an old friend. It felt like coming home. I walked across the lot, my strides even and purposeful. In my left hand, I carried a sealed aluminum case. A second vehicle, a military SUV, pulled up behind mine. The door opened, and Commander Hayes, a SEAL commander I'd served under in Afghanistan, stepped out in his dress blues. He didn't follow me. He simply stood there, calmly speaking with a base EXO. My actions were sanctioned. This wasn't revenge. This was an operation. I saw the washout crew huddled near the motor pool, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. They saw me, and the last of their drunken bravado evaporated in the morning sun. This wasn't a costume. They knew, instinctively, that they were looking at the real thing. The final confrontation happened at 0915, inside the cavernous equipment cage. They were waiting for me, all 5 of them, blocking the only exit. "We need to talk," Leo said, his voice trembling slightly. "You can't just show up in stolen gear and intimidate us," JT added, his fear making him aggressive. Greg Russo made the final, critical mistake. As I reached for my radio, he lunged forward and knocked it out of my hand. "No backup this time," Leo snarled. They thought they had me trapped. They were wrong. Leo charged first, a clumsy, telegraphed rush. It was pathetic. I didn't even have to think. I sidestepped, used his own momentum against him, and guided him face first into a steel support beam. He crumpled to the ground. Kevin Shaw swung a wild haymaker. I intercepted his wrist, twisted it into a standard joint lock, and put him on his knees, screaming in pain. Russo came at me with a tie-down chain. I moved inside his swing, swept his legs, and his head hit the concrete with a sickening thud. Junior tried to blindside me. A simple forearm block and a knee to his solar plexus folded him in half. JT was already scrambling for the door when it swung open. Commander Hayes stood there, flanked by 2 MPs. He looked at the scene, me, standing calmly in the center and the 5 men writhing on the floor. "Commander Rain," he said, his voice perfectly level. "Situation report. 5 subjects attempted unlawful detention and assault, sir." I replied, my breathing steady. I responded with minimum necessary force to neutralize the threat. From the floor, Leo groaned. "That was minimum force?" I looked down at him, my expression unreadable. "Son," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of years of combat. "If I had used maximum force, you wouldn't be conscious to ask that question." I then crouched down, meeting his terrified gaze. "Lieutenant Commander Rain, United States Navy, Naval Special Warfare Command. You want to know if I was real? This is your answer. That day wasn't about revenge for me. It was about a promise. When they burned that trident, they weren't just burning a piece of cloth. They were desecrating an emblem of sacrifice, a symbol of honor that men I loved had died for. My response was a duty to them, and to the uniform I swore to uphold. The incident solidified something in me. The quiet life was over. I knew with absolute certainty that I belonged back with my team, back in the fight. My journey through hell had only made me stronger, and I was ready to go back. Have you ever been in a situation where you were completely underestimated, where someone judged you on your appearance and not your substance? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Do you think that true respect has to be earned through action, or should it be a given? People like Leo Vance and his crew exist everywhere, and I wonder what it truly takes to make them understand their mistake. If my story made you think about the quiet strength that lies hidden in so many people, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories like this. Share this with someone who knows that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you notice the least. I read every comment you leave, and I want to hear your thoughts. More incredible, true stories from my life are waiting on your screen. Watch those next, and I'll see you tomorrow with another story that changed everything for me. Thanks for watching.